Our committee meets once a week on the second Friday of each month, and we move around Union County. We're hosted by each municipality in turn. I see a mayor or two around. I want to thank them for their hospitality. We are a local committee. Our job is to be liaison between the chamber members and their local and county governments. If you're a chamber member and interested, please respond to the invitation and attend one of our meetings. Get choked up about it. My second responsibility is to introduce Jim Coyle, the CEO of the Chamber. As you all know, the driving force behind the regional chamber, Mr. Jim Coyle.
Well, thank you, John, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to this debate between Congressman Lance and Mayor Kovach. We're looking forward to a very spirited morning. Let me, first, a lot of you are not members of the Gateway Chamber, so just very briefly, we are a regional business organization. We are, in fact, the largest business association in the northern New Jersey, New York metropolitan region. We have about 1,200 members representing about 350,000 employees. We are also one of the oldest business associations around. We were founded in 1911, so this is our 103rd year of operation. And though many people joke about it, I was not around at the founding. However, John D. Rockefeller was one of our founding members, so we do have a long-term history with New Jersey manufacturing and New Jersey business. So this morning we are hosting a debate between the candidates for the 7th Congressional District. And let me say that while we are very honored to host this debate, I don't like the format. I don't like the way debates like this work, because we have a limited amount of time and we have very important issues to discuss. So we worked with the Chamber membership. We did a lot of work with the U.S. Chamber to come up with topics that are really of importance to the business community. Many of you sent us ideas on things to cover this morning. And at the end of the day, we came up with 15 broad topic areas that are of real importance to the business community. This morning, we're only going to be able to discuss 5 of those issues. Now also, given the way debates work, I'm only going to give each candidate 3 minutes to answer a question. And these questions are of such importance that 3 minutes is nowhere adequate. So, in addition to listening to their responses today, I encourage you to visit with them, talk to them about issues that are of concern to you. Also to go to their websites and get more detail on their positions on these very important matters. Now, as I say, each candidate is going to have 3 minutes to answer the questions after making an opening statement. The order was decided by the flip of a coin. Now you may notice that the candidates are a long ways away from me. This is no indication about how they feel about each other. We are not afraid that...
Or about you, Jim.
We are not afraid that they are going to be throwing things at each other. However, given the lighting in here, had we moved them closer, they would have had halos behind their heads on the filming.
I'm for that.
So that is the reason that the podiums are a little ways apart. Now, each topic has been given to the candidates in advance. However, the specific questions that we will be asking are not given to them. So although each candidate has notes, they do not have the individual questions. Maybe they kind of guessed what we're going to ask, but you know, we are very clear that we want them to be spontaneous in answering. Now, for the first question, they will have 3 minutes to answer. Our timekeeper will hold up a yellow card at 2 minutes and 30 seconds and hold that card up until 3 minutes, and then they will hold up the red card. So when that red card does come up, I would ask that you stop your answer so that we can move on to the next question. We also ask that the audience not get too involved, not clap, not make rude sounds, no cheering, and certainly no throwing food, especially at me. These are, after all, questions about business and economics, and so, you know, pretty dry stuff when you come right down to it, although we think very important. Now also, I would ask each candidate to answer the question that is asked. Back in my early life, I used to manage campaigns, and I used to tell my candidates, it doesn't matter what they ask, just answer what you want, or actually answer what I want you to. But in this case, we will ask them to please respond to the actual question asked. Now, I want to thank Kaz Velan from Premier Media for being the videographer this morning. We will put this up on YouTube, hopefully by the end of the weekend. And also I'd like to thank the Holiday Inn for hosting this morning. So with that, I would ask candidate Kovach to start with her opening statement.
Sure. Thank you to the Gateway and to everyone for being here. I know Friday mornings early are not always the easiest thing to do. So just a little bit about myself. I am currently the mayor for the town of Clinton. I've been serving for the last 3 years. Prior to that, I was director for the New Jersey Division on Women under Governor Corzine, and for a short period of time under Governor Christie. And what we did there was we focused on programs impacting women in New Jersey. So we funded the domestic violence, sexual assault, displaced homemaker. We worked on micro-business credit programs, basically working to give women an opportunity to come up out of poverty and become economically self-sufficient, and also to break a cycle of violence. Before that, I was a councilwoman in the town of Clinton. And prior to that, I did work in the corporate world. I worked for Prudential, NatWest, and Fleet Bank. For Prudential, I ran a 24/7 call center, 1-800-THE ROCK, as well as a marketing project management team. And when Prudential was moving their call center out to California, my husband's business is in New York, so unfortunately we weren't moving out to California, and I decided to do some consulting work. So I did a little bit of consulting for a short period of time. I do have 3 children. I have a daughter who is 24. She graduated college in December of 2012. And I have 2 boys who are in middle school. They are, it's interesting because my daughter is completely apolitical and does not like to be involved in the politics, but yet she works locally. So a lot of times residents will go into her bank and say, "Tell your mother." And my 2 boys love having mom as a mayor because, you know, they get to know everyone. Whether that they're still going to enjoy that when they're teenagers, we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But a lot of the work that we've done as the town of Clinton. So I am the only Democrat on a Republican council. And I will tell you that I probably have one of the best councils in Hunterdon County as well as in the state of New Jersey, because we work together. And I say we because this is not an I effort. This is all about the work that needs to be done for our communities. And we focus on what's the right thing to do, not what's the politically correct or what's not the politically expedient or what's going to help someone get elected. We truly look at the issues facing our communities and work to get those issues addressed. When I became mayor for the town of Clinton, we had a lot of financial issues that we were facing. And in less than 3 years, we have turned the town around financially. It has been not an easy road, but definitely not a hard road either. And it's because we work together, we put aside our party differences and focused on what needs to be done. I take Democrats to task as much as I take Republicans to task, because for me it's about serving my community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congressman Lance.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you all. And my thanks to the Gateway Chamber for hosting this debate. And the Chamber has a tradition of hosting debates. I was involved in the debate in the primary race earlier this year, and Assemblyman Shevakula and I debated before the Chamber 2 years ago. and I commend the fact that you sponsor these important forums. It's my honor to represent this part of New Jersey in the Congress of the United States, and particularly here in Union County, Berkeley Heights, Clark, Cranford, Garwood, Kenilworth, Mountainside, New Providence, Scotch Plains, Springfield, Summit, Union Township, Westfield, and Winfield. This congressional district includes not only the municipalities I've just mentioned in Union County, but a portion of Essex County, a portion of Warren County, Morris County, Somerset County, and all of Hunterdon County, where my wife and I live outside the village of Stanton in Clinton Township with a mailing address of Lebanon. Only in New Jersey, perhaps 3 addresses, but 1 residence. I commend Mayor Kovach for her public service, not only as mayor of the town of Clinton, which is the hole in the donut, as Clinton Township, where my wife and I live, is the larger area surrounding the town of Clinton. And I certainly commend Mayor Kovach for her interest in issues of importance such as domestic violence. I am the sponsor of the legislation in this state that funds the domestic violence shelters in New Jersey. The most important issue confronting the nation is the state of the American economy, and it's not nearly as strong as it should be, and we need to have a stronger American economy. Tax reform, regulatory reform, tort reform, moving toward a balanced budget, and all of the above, energy strategy, and this, I believe, will get the economy moving in a stronger way. And if I am reelected to the Congress of the United States, that is what I intend to have my principal focus. Finally, let me say that I have been honored to be endorsed in this race by the Hunterdon Review, the Bernardsville News, the Warren Echo's Sentinel, the Mount Olive Chronicle, the Roxbury Register, and the Easton Express Times. I tried to be bipartisan, and in its endorsement of me, the Express Times has pointed that out. I think we have to move forward together as a nation. Republicans and Democrats in the House, Republicans and Democrats in the United States Senate, and I'm willing to extend a hand of cooperation with the President of the United States in his last 2 years in office. The issues that confront this nation are far greater than any political party, and we must work together to improve the nation we all love. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, our first question will concern financial services and Mr. Lance. Small businesses depend on banks, especially community banks, to access needed capital for their business operations and to create jobs. Regulations from Dodd-Frank have created pressure on all banks, big and small, to reduce their risk portfolios. While this has been done with good intentions, it has made getting a loan a lot harder for small businesses. How would you help banks control their risk without hurting small businesses?
Thank you. And I did serve on the Financial Services Committee my first 2 years in Congress before being promoted to the Energy and Commerce Committee. The Energy and Commerce Committee is the oldest committee in the House. It is the committee with the greatest jurisdiction, and we have put more bills on the President's desk from the Energy and Commerce Committee, and he has signed those bills than any other committee in the Congress. I did not vote for Dodd-Frank, and I didn't vote for it for several reasons, including the reason you have suggested, Jim. And let me say, regarding community banks were in no way responsible for the financial meltdown. And I believe that at the very least, Dodd-Frank needs to be modified so that community banks can go about the lending that is essential to the better health of the American nation. Dodd-Frank also places in statute, it institutionalizes too big to fail. And there are certain systemic organizations, not named, of course, in the legislation, but certain large organizations which I fear would be in a situation of too big to fail again, were we to have a second financial crisis. And I think it's important that we permit community banks to lend. I see this because the district here, the 7th District, is 75 municipalities. So it is comprised of small and medium-sized towns across north-central New Jersey. And we see it out in Hunterdon County, Mayor Kovach and I, in the town of Clinton, where there are banks. And this district has Main Street after Main Street, and I would amend Dodd-Frank so as to permit community banks to do a better job in lending. I also think we need an audit of the Federal Reserve Board. I'm greatly concerned about the fact that there has been quantitative easing. I do not think that that could continue indefinitely. There has been a tapering of that, but I think we need major reform of the Federal Reserve Board. I have voted for an audit of that. And let me say, regarding the meltdown, I think Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were involved to a great extent, and those institutions need reform as well. And so in sum, a further reform of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, a full audit of the Federal Reserve Board, and modification of Dodd-Frank, a piece of legislation for which I did not vote, to permit community banks to move forward to do the lending that will be necessary to further improve our economy. Our economy is not nearly strong enough. A 5.9 unemployment rate is not good enough. We need to lower that, and we certainly need a greater labor participation rate in this country.
Thank you. Ms. Kovach, same question. How would you help banks manage their risk without hurting small business?
Thank you, Jim. And I don't necessarily disagree with Congressman Lance. You know, coming from the financial services industry, I understand that there are still a lot of fixes that need to happen. You know, we've pushed through legislation in a lot of respects, and the idea is to get something on the table, to get something started. But that doesn't mean that the legislation stops there. Legislation should be an evolving process. We should be looking at it on a regular basis so that we're making modifications and we're doing what needs to be done to address the needs of our small businesses. Clinton is all about small business. We have a thriving Main Street. I know many of my small businesses struggle every single day, but yet they're doing all they can to maintain, because they understand that if they close, they're going to impact not just their employees, but the economy of the town as well. So we need to be focusing on our small businesses, and we need to be working with the banks. We need to be sitting down with the lenders to understand what some of the specifics that they need. You know, I get that there's a concern around oversight, but for me, coming from a financial services industry and watching bank merger after bank merger after bank merger, this is where some of the systems are broken. We allow things to slip through the cracks, and we need to focus on what has to happen in order to ensure the safety net for our communities and for our small businesses. And as I said, legislation is evolving. You have something that you start with. Now let's sit back at the table. What I don't want to see happen is that we're doing everything in a fishbowl, that we're sitting down and we're writing legislation based on one specific experience, putting it out there and saying, okay, this is done, on to the next. No, this is our first step. Let's take that first step, sit down with the business community, sit down with the banking community, and understand what's important and how we can help them. Because it really is, it's a partnership. This isn't about the government telling banks or small businesses what to do. It's asking, how can we help? How can we help improve the business? How can we help improve your lending capabilities? And is it modifications to Dodd-Frank? Absolutely. I'm not going to disagree with that. What do those specific modifications look like? I think that's still a conversation that needs to take place. I think it's as I said, sitting down, not in a fishbowl, but bringing people to the table that have a stake in what's going on and focusing on getting those adjustments made so that we're prepared to move forward with bipartisan legislation, because that's what this is about. This can't be about parties. This has to be about focusing on our communities back home and our small businesses that are struggling and getting the right pieces amended to the legislation, regardless if a party agrees with it or not. If it's the right thing for the communities, if it's the right thing for our small business community and our banking in our communities, then that's what we need to be focusing on. Thank you.
Mr. Lance, Dodd-Frank is a huge piece of legislation that regulates a lot more than just the banking industry. What else would you change?
I would like to encourage more community banks across this country. For the reasons I've suggested, too big to fail impresses me as not being a way forward. And let me say that Jeb Hensarling, who is the chairman of the Financial Services Services Committee, I think, is trying to work through the process. We have not been able to modify Dodd-Frank because although my side of the aisle controls the House, we do not control the U.S. Senate. And if we are able to get control of the U.S. Senate, I think that we will modify Dodd-Frank to help community banks, to permit them to lend. And this is based upon the fact that community banks did not overextend themselves before the crisis, and yet they are being punished, in my judgment, punitively because of the bad actions of much larger institutions. And let me say regarding Mr. Hensarling, over in the Senate, Senator Menendez is on the Finance Committee. And so I would like to see a working together in a bipartisan capacity with Chairman Hensarling and with our senior United States Senator here in New Jersey so that we can have modifications for community banks. And this I see all the time here in this district because we are small towns, 75 small towns. And regarding the town of Clinton itself, where the mayor is mayor, our family law firm is in that municipality. We pay taxes in the town of Clinton. My brother's law practice is in the town of Clinton. And our great uncle was the president of the local bank. The local bank no longer exists. It merged and merged and merged and merged. And I would like to see a much healthier community bank community, and I'm sure the mayor agrees with me on that, a healthier bank community in the small towns that dot this congressional district and indeed are the essence of the United States.
Ms. Kovach, same question. How would you improve financial regulation in the United States beyond just the banking sector?
Congressman, you're absolutely correct. I don't disagree. We need to be focusing more on our small community banks. And I have watched. When I first started my career, it was with NatWest Bank, and they had just taken over First Jersey. And in that time, I was NatWest, and then Fleet Bank, and then right after I left, it became Bank of America. And it's continued to grow. And we've seen more and more of our small community banks being taken up by the larger banks. We just had a recent one in Clinton Township. Team Capital was a small community bank. It's now part of the Provident network. Now, Provident is still a small bank, but does Provident now become more attractive to a large bank because it's now got more branches? It's larger and maybe fills in where some of the other banks are looking to fill in. So, absolutely, I think we definitely need to ensure that our small banks are part of our communities. In the town of Clinton, we have 7 banks in the town. For 1.3 square miles, we have 7 banks. So, I see and I go from the Bank of America to the Unity Bank, which you have some of those branches here in Union County as well. I want to see the Unity banks continue to thrive. And what it is we need to do is to be sitting at the table with members of the banking industry, members of the financial services industry, and understanding how we're going to best serve them. What do they need in order to ensure that we're providing, again, the best amendments to the legislation, and it's going to do the greatest work possible. I'm not down in Congress right now, so I'm not part of all the conversations that are taking place, but I can guarantee that if I am in Congress, I will be sitting at that table and engaging in many of those conversations.
All right, that wasn't too controversial, so let's move on to the next topic, tax policy. Ms. Kovach, your question. The U.S. tax system at every level is broken. Recently, there has been tremendous controversy over so-called tax inversions, where U.S. corporations are moving their corporate headquarters abroad to limit their overseas earnings from being taxed multiple times. How would you change the tax systems so companies will want to move to the U.S. rather than away from?
Thank you. Absolutely. And this, again, is another one of those issues that it's so important to our communities. I see my small businesses paying taxes every single day, but yet I see companies like Apple and Google able to avoid paying taxes. for companies that are moving and are taking their businesses overseas, there should be I don't want to say a penalty, but something similar to a penalty so that they're encouraged to keep them here. Offer the tax incentives that are appropriate based on the business. You know, I look at, I think it was $90 billion in tax revenue that should be coming to the Treasury, but it's not because companies are transferring profits overseas. So that has to be addressed. We need to be having conversations. And you know, someone asked me, well, then they're going to tell you that they're going to go out of business. Well, I dare Apple to go out of business. I dare Google to go out of business. They're not going out of business. They are going to do what we tell them to do and what we require of them because they understand that we are a huge part of their market. So, you know, someone threatening me, I don't take threats real well in any way, shape, or form. Just ask my husband. He knows easily that the minute you threaten that you're going to take something away because I'm going to, you know, we need to sit down and have a conversation. And I'm not saying that we tell them specifically what it is, but it's a conversation that takes place that says, these are the incentives for you to keep your businesses here, to ensure that you're growing the jobs and the economy here in New Jersey or in the United States. I worked for, I did some consulting work for Saks Fifth Avenue, and they had a distribution center in Aberdeen, Maryland. Well, they found that they could do some of their call center work and catalog work cheaper in Tennessee. They stayed in the United States because they understood the importance of maintaining a presence here. Now, I'm not working for them any longer, so I don't know if that's still the case, but we need to encourage those businesses to keep their call centers here, to keep businesses here, to keep production and manufacturing here. And I think by having a conversation and sitting down and working through the best way and the best opportunity for those businesses, I think we'll get to see more of that come back. And again, it's conversations, it's talking through what's important and what drives them to take it over. I get that, you know, you have shareholders that you are accountable to, but at the same time you're accountable to the American people, and you need to be paying your fair share of taxes as well. Thank you.
Congressman Lance, same question. How would you change tax regulation to encourage businesses to bring money to the United States rather than take it out of the United States?
Yes, thank you. And this is an excellent question, and I think that it's central to how the private sector is going to create more American jobs. We have corporate tax policy in this country, and we have tax policy for all of us who pay on April 15th individual taxes. First, regarding individual taxes, the marginal rate at the moment is 39.6%. I would like to see that lowered if possible. I would like to return to the two rates of the 1980s, 15% and 28%. This was accomplished by a strong Republican, President Ronald Reagan, and a strong Democrat, United States Senator Bill Bradley of New Jersey. He took the lead in the Congress on that, and I would like to see a reform of individual rates. I think that that would spur economic activity in this country. And then regarding your specific issue of inversion and on corporate tax policy, we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world, 35%, much higher than our competitors. And not only do we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world, ladies and gentlemen, we also have a system where if you earn profits abroad, you cannot bring them back to the United States without paying the differential between the lower corporate tax rate abroad and the higher corporate tax rate here. We are the only industrialized power in the world where that is the case. And it inhibits companies from bringing their profits abroad back to the United States to create American jobs. And therefore, companies are inverting. They are making their headquarters in Canada or in Europe. And I oppose that. And the way to make sure that that does not occur in the future is to reform our corporate tax policy. And the way to do that is to have what is known as a territorial system of taxation. And that means if you earn profits abroad, you pay those taxes abroad, and then you can bring the profits back to the United States, and we can create American jobs, and you do not have to pay the differential between the lower corporate rate abroad and the higher corporate rate here in this country. All other industrialized powers do it that way. We do not do it that way, and it would be my #1 goal in tax policy to reform both the individual rates and the corporate rates And if we were to reform the corporate rates, as I have suggested, there would be far fewer inversions, number one. There would be the creation of more American jobs, number two. And we would have even more revenues in the federal coffer because the unemployment rate would be lowered, more Americans would be working, and certainly this is the view of those of us who serve in the House on the Republican side. I hope that Paul Ryan becomes chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and I want to work with whoever is the chair over in the Senate, Republican or Democratic, and we should move forward together.
Follow-up question, Ms. Kovach. The U.S. tax system is unfair to individuals and businesses large and small. Small business in particular pays very high rates of tax, which limits their potential for reinvesting in their business. How would you reform the tax system to promote small business?
Thank you. Absolutely. One of the things that I've talked about and I focused on is increasing the deduction limit for startup expenses for small business from $5,000 to $20,000. And I think that would help push more businesses to start up to be able to have that deduction up front. I think it's also a conversation, again, with the small businesses, because small business, I try not to paint anyone with a broad brush stroke. Unfortunately, as a small town mayor, a lot of times we're part of a state government and we get painted with a broad brush stroke. And regulations are put on us that don't necessarily work for our benefit, they work for the larger communities. So for me, it's about understanding the different types of businesses here in New Jersey, in this country, understanding the differences between the service industries and the manufacturing and the science and technology, and working with them to understand what is going to help them drive their business and grow their business. Because again, this has to come from the people. It has to come from the businesses that want to start here in the United States or in New Jersey. Top down doesn't work. That much I can tell you. We need to work with them to understand what's important, work with them to understand how do we help them grow and start their businesses, and what parts of the tax policy need to be revisited. And absolutely, I mean, I look at when my husband we do our taxes every year, it is beyond unbearable as an individual. You know, for a small business, he's a small business owner as well, and what he goes through as a small business owner is just, you know, it's a miserable time of year for us when we're doing our taxes. So how do we help the small businesses continue to grow, and what are their needs, ensuring that they can grow the business, create more jobs, and still be successful? Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman Leonard, same question. How would you reform small business tax?
Most small businesses pay taxes through the individual side of the code and not through the corporate side. And what I favor is, if possible, over time, lowering rates. Now that will involve simplification of the tax code, and there are certain tax preferences that should be reformed, and some even should be repealed. But I would favor lower rates because most small businesses pay their taxes through the individual rates, and I have suggested two rates, 15% and 28%. That's not a completely flat system. It is a flatter system, a less complicated system, and in my judgment, a fairer system. I also think regarding small businesses, we need regulatory reform, and we're working on that in Congress, and we certainly need tort reform. And frankly, also we need health care reform. Many small businesses have great challenges with the current configuration of the health care law. I see this virtually every week in the district offices here in New Jersey, the district office in Westfield, the district office out in Raritan Township with a Flemington mailing address. Small businessmen and women come into these offices and point out how they are greatly challenged by the health care legislation. And so I need reform of that, believe in reform of that as well. But if we were to lower rates, making the system simpler and fairer, if we were to have regulatory reform, tort reform, and health care reform, I think we would go a long way in supporting small business. And incidentally, small business in this country will create 7 in 10 of the new jobs that we need in America. It's not large businesses that are creating jobs. It's small businesses that create jobs here in this country. And certainly the Gateway Chamber of Commerce knows more about that than I do. And we have to encourage small business, the job creator in this country.
Thank you. So now we will move on to energy policy. Congressman Lance, the first 3 phases of the Keystone Pipeline have been built and are in operation. The 4th phase, Keystone XL, has been delayed. As a result of this delay, oil from Canada and the Bakken fields in Montana and North Dakota are moving by rail. It takes 11 unit trains a mile long each day, to move the oil which could be moved by the pipeline. Many towns along the routes of these trains have raised safety questions and environmental concerns. Of course, it also takes 11 empty trains going back each day, and if it takes 2 days to move to your site, you have 44 miles worth of oil trains moving through the country. This has caused a dramatic increase in freight rates and difficulty in moving grain harvests out of the Midwest. Is it time to build Keystone XL?
Thank you. I favor the building of Keystone XL. I favor it for several reasons. It will create United States jobs, American jobs, at least in the building of the pipeline. That doesn't mean all of those jobs will be retained once the pipeline has been completed, but it certainly will create jobs while the pipeline is being built. It is supported by both labor and business alike. It will lessen our dependence on dangerous sources of energy from the Middle East and Venezuela. And a State Department report regarding Keystone XL finds that the project would have a minimal impact on the environment. And I hope that the President chooses to say yes to this. At the moment, the President has said neither yes nor no. And by saying neither yes, or not saying yes, not saying no, that is in effect a no, because it's stalled. And I'm pleased that the State Department has confirmed that there is no evidence of any negative environmental impact. And I would hope that the President would look to the analysis from his State Department. And let me make another point about Keystone XL. This is favored by our strong ally, Canada. And of course, we all extend our deepest sympathy to the Canadian people based upon the tragedy that occurred earlier this week. And Prime Minister Harper has said repeatedly that he favors the building of Keystone XL. Canada has been a wonderful ally to us, and in meetings among the President of the United States, the President of Mexico, and the Prime Minister of Canada, Prime Minister Harper has repeatedly requested that the President agree to this. My hope is that after the election, the President will say yes. I, of course, would like him to say yes this afternoon. This raises a larger issue regarding energy. We need an all-of-the-above energy strategy. That means new sources of energy like wind and solar and the other sources that are without pollutant capacity, and I support that. But we also need to rely on more traditional forms of energy. I would like to see less reliance, and I'm particularly pleased that there is an abundance of natural gas in this country. And for the first time in many, many years, in 2 or 3 years, we may be a net exporter of energy based largely as a result of natural gas exploration. I want to do that in a responsible fashion, in an environmentally sound fashion. I want it to be able to be transmitted across the region in an environmentally sound fashion. But for the reasons I have suggested, I favor the building of Keystone XL.
Ms. Kovach, same question. Should we move the oil by rail or by pipeline?
I am not a proponent of the pipeline. I've never been a proponent of pipelines, and I understand the Congressman's point about job creation. I think there are a number of other infrastructure opportunities that are less hazardous to our environment, that will put more Americans back to work for a longer period of time, that we can focus on. My concern with the pipelines is we're not thinking about the individuals that we're impacting as we build that pipeline. So the homes that will be condemned, the farms, the open space that will be used. You know, here in New Jersey, we preserve open space and we do a great job of preserving open space. But that's not so that a pipeline can come through and destroy that open space. To me, we need to be looking at opportunities to create, if we have to have pipelines, we need to be looking at energy corridors. So if there are pipelines that have to happen, and I understand that there probably will be pipelines that are going to be coming through, where are we looking to put them in an easement that already has existing infrastructure, whether it be natural gas or other utilities? So we need to understand that, number one. We also need to move away from fossil fuel. You know, yes, we have an abundance of natural gas right now, but that will expire at some point in time. And whether it may not be in my lifetime, it may not be in my children's lifetime, it may be in my grandchildren's lifetime. But there will be an end to fossil fuels here in the United States. So we need to move towards new and renewable energies. We need to move towards wind. We need to move towards solar, towards geothermal. And we need to provide the subsidies to those renewable energies, because again, we create jobs by creating an opportunity for increasing the production of the new and renewable energies. So, you know, while job creation is extremely important to me, I don't believe that the pipeline is our only answer to job creation. I think that there are other opportunities that we should be using to create the energy, create jobs, and it's doing it in a more clean and more effective way. I mean, every generation has a defining moment, and climate change for us is that defining moment. And the pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline, I am opposed to. I am opposed to the fast tracking of legislation that would allow pipelines to happen quickly. There needs to be so much work done. You know, New Jersey, there's talk about 6 more pipelines coming through New Jersey, but there's no path and no plan. We need to ensure that if these pipelines have to come through, that we're doing it in the most effective way, that we're keeping them to corridors that can support them, and that it's the companies paying for it, not the residents through losing their homes and losing their properties. Thank you.
Okay, follow-up question, Mr. Lands. Penn East has proposed to build a pipeline from Pennsylvania to New Jersey, part of which will pass through the 7th Congressional District, and bring low-cost Marcellus gas to customers in New Jersey. What is your opinion of this proposal, which will require approval from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission?
I oppose it. I think that it is not a good idea to place a pipeline under preserved land, under farmland that has been preserved, open space that has been preserved. And my views on this are based upon the fact that when I was in the state legislature, I was the sponsor of major legislation that reached the ballot to protect farmland and open space. I'm very proud of that, and I certainly think you can be for an all of the above energy strategy without being for every potential pipeline that is being suggested. And I have stated consistently that I think that that company, Penn East, should look elsewhere, and we already have pipelines in New Jersey, and so perhaps they could use a pipeline that is already in existence. This will come before FERC, and I believe that FERC has to look to not only federal statutory law, but it has to be in compliance with all required laws and regulations at the local level. At least FERC should look to state law here in New Jersey, and we do a very strong job in New Jersey of preserving farmland and open space. And this is an issue not only in the western part of the district, it's also an issue in Pennsylvania. And there are now forums occurring, and I would urge that energy company to participate in every public forum that's possible. I think the company recently canceled a forum before the Mercer County Freeholder Board, and I think that was inappropriate. I do favor the concept of energy corridors for the Keystone XL pipeline. It would be in states, as I understand it, of North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. I think that's vastly different, and there are wide open spaces different from the preserved farmland and open space that we have done such a good job in New Jersey in a bipartisan capacity. And I note the presence, for example, of Senator Kane, my successor as minority leader in the state Senate, and in a bipartisan way, the legislature in this state tries to preserve land.
Thank you. Ms. Kovach, same question. I can pretty much guess your answer, but
Sure.
how do you feel about pennies?
Well, let me just respond to one of the Congressman's points about the Keystone. I understand that it wasn't coming through New Jersey, that it was coming through North Dakota, South Dakota, and the Midwestern states, but some of those same American citizens will be losing their farmlands and losing their homes because of that pipeline as well. So, you know, for me, it's about what is the overall strategy for pipelines. I get that it is a necessary evil, but let's ensure that we're doing all we can to protect not just our residents here in the 7th District or New Jersey, but all residents in the country with regards to the pipeline. As far as Penn East, no, I am absolutely opposed to it. I signed a letter as mayor to the DEP commissioner, and the town of Clinton did a resolution supporting Delaware Township, you know, opposing the pipeline and focusing on the fact that it is going to be tearing up the open space and farmland that we have worked so hard to preserve here in New Jersey. You know, New Jersey is one of the most densely populated states, and to talk about the pipelines without an overarching plan of what is the capacity that New Jersey could actually sustain. Is there a limited number of pipelines? I mean, we're talking about densely populated areas where pipelines could be traveling through. You know, is the number 3 pipelines, and that's the maximum that New Jersey. But I don't hear anyone talking about that. I don't hear anyone. We're doing these one-offs. We're focusing on Penn East, but yet I also hear Diamond East is coming, and they're talking about running parallel to the Transco pipeline. We need to stop it all and understand from a larger perspective, how do we do our best to protect our residents and do all we can to you know, to do the pipelines that we have to do, but also put the limits on what we can actually support. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we will move on to a discussion of immigration. Ms. Kovach, the first question is for you. When discussing immigration, the discussion invariably revolves around illegal immigration and pathways to citizenship. The more important issue from the perspective of the business community is a terrible system of work visas which hurt small businesses in particular. In fact, much illegal immigration can be traced to the problem of easily obtaining a proper visa. What can be done to decouple the discussion of work visas from the larger immigration problem and deal with it separately? How would you reform the work visa program to encourage more people to enter the country legally and for a set period of time?
Thank you. Yes, immigration is truly an issue that we need to address. And with regards to the work visa, it's interesting that you asked that question, because several weeks ago I was at a dinner and President Bush was speaking, and he was talking about his immigration reform and how he had been a proponent of the temporary work visas and making it easier for immigrants to come over and do, whether it's temporary work, short-term work. We absolutely have to focus on that. And for the people who are currently here, we need to ensure that they have the opportunity to obtain those visas. You know, there are almost 12 million undocumented, and many of them are undocumented because their visas have expired. So it's not people who have come through the desert, but people who have come via airplane or via, you know, trains or boats, whatever, cars, if they're coming from Canada. So, you know, they're here. We need to do all we can to help them. And with regards to the work visas, there needs to be a piece that if they were on a visa and it expired, they need to have the opportunity to be able to fast track that and get to a place where they can get it renewed. Not with they go to immigration and because their visa's expired, they have the threat of deportation. It is, you know, all right, your visa's expired, here's what you need to do in order to continue staying and continue working. As long as they're working, many of them are contributing to their communities, they're paying taxes, they're here working and contributing to our communities. So we need to do all we can to help them with that. You know, the thought of deporting 12 million people would be lining buses up from Alaska to the southern border in order for us to be able to deport 12 million people. So that's not the case. We need to focus on ensuring that those who are here who are working have the ability to continue those work visas and not threatening them with deportation when they try to get them reapplied for. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lance, same question. Can we decouple the discussion of work visas from the more general immigration problem?
I think that this is an issue that we are likely to approach step by step, and I will discuss specifically the work visas portion of it. Let me first say, however, that I do not think work visas or any other aspect of the larger problem will be addressed until we first get control of our southern border. And I want to work on all areas of this topic, but first we have to get control of our southern border. And to that end, over the summer I voted for legislation passing the House that did that, and I'm particularly of the view that Chairman McCall's legislation, and he chairs the Homeland Security Committee, is the way forward. It sets certain metrics of performance regarding the southern border. I've had the privilege of traveling with Chairman McCall to the southern border, south of San Diego, south of Tucson, Arizona, and the Rio Grande Valley in McAllen, Texas, the very bottom of Texas, and you have been reading about that area because of the fact that the border is not secure. Once that occurs, and I hope the Senate will pass our legislation regarding securing the southern border, either in lame duck or the new Senate beginning in January, then I agree with you that we should work on the worker visa issue. It is an important issue. It's important to New Jersey because we rely on highly skilled employees, some of whom have work visas, not only in large companies, but in small companies as well. And it's also very important to other parts of the nation. I was in Silicon Valley and in places in that section of California. It's incredibly important that work visas continue. And we were told by, I think, Sheryl Sandberg, that some of these companies are looking to be headquartered in places abroad, including London, because we have not addressed this issue here in the United States. And so I favor addressing it in a way that would make it possible for those who are here and those who have been educated here, that they might stay here and not go back to other countries once we have engaged in very fine higher education. And then there are other aspects of the immigration issue, agriculture, and certainly in the middle of the country. As we discuss work visas here on the East Coast and the West Coast, in the middle of the country, there has to be reform regarding agriculture, and I know Chairman Lucas of the Agriculture Committee is working on that. And then there are the much larger issues. How do we deal with those who are not here legally? I oppose citizenship for those who came here as adults illegally. Citizenship. I understand we should be bringing people out of the shadows, but I am personally opposed to citizenship for that classification of individual. But let me say, I certainly agree with the tenor of the question, and we ought to work on the worker visa issue. But I do not think we will do that until we first secure the southern border, and I hope that occurs with the passage of legislation in lame duck.
All right, so my follow-up question was going to be, what do you do with the 12 million people who are already here? But since both of you have already answered that, I think we'll just move on to the last question, which deals with health care. So, Mr. Lance, what do you like about the Affordable Care Act?
Thank you. I have 3 minutes to answer that question. What I like about the Affordable Care Act. What I like about it is that it was an attempt to reform a system that needed to be reformed. And I do not want to go back to the system before the passage of the ACA. And my views on this matter are based upon the fact that I serve on the Committee of Jurisdiction, the House Energy and Commerce Committee. I serve on 3 of its subcommittees, including the Health Subcommittee, which is the subcommittee of jurisdiction for this extremely important issue. I also like the fact that young people can stay on their parents' policies until they're 26, and that you cannot deny coverage based upon a pre-existing condition. However, I have significant and major concerns with the overall tenor of the legislation. And to be specific, there are men and women who come into my offices here in New Jersey weekly who tell me that they are no longer able to keep their health care insurance policies, or that their health care insurance policies have increased dramatically in premium. And actually, some people come into the office and are crying. So what would I do? Because it's not just good enough to be critical of the ACA. What would I do? I favor health savings accounts. I favor tort reform. I favor permitting together pooling of like-minded interests. I favor purchasing of policies across state lines. And I favor continuation of letting young people stay on their parents' policies until they're 26 and no denial of coverage based upon a pre-existing condition. Now, what I favor would not insure all Americans. And that was the promise of Obamacare. But Obamacare has clearly not insured all Americans because the Supreme Court of the United States ruled as unconstitutional that provision of Obamacare that forced states to increase their Medicaid populations. And that forced increase of Medicaid was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of the United States. So I think we should move forward in a positive, optimistic fashion. And I've been critical of my own party for not providing an alternative. I have just provided you with the alternative I favor. And let me say parenthetically, I think that the Supreme Court of the United States should take the case, determining whether or not there could be subsidies to the federal exchange. 36 of the 50 states are in the federal exchange, including New Jersey, have not created state exchanges. And as I read the underlying statute, there cannot be subsidies for the federal exchange. I asked Secretary Sebelius about this when she came before the committee on which I serve. I am the person on that committee who gets to ask the constitutional law questions, and I believe the Supreme Court of the United States is likely to rule that there can be no subsidies to the federal exchange. And if and when that occurs, then certainly we will have to go back to the drawing board.
Thank you. Ms. Kovach, the opposite question. What don't you like about the Affordable Care Act?
Okay, so what don't I like? I don't like the fact that it is not perfect. The intent of the Affordable Care Act was to, as the Congressman stated, to provide insurance for all American citizens. And it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. But part of that is, you know, I look at, as I was doing some of my research, I was looking back, and Medicare, which rolled out in 1964, 1966, has multiple amendments to it because it was modified. Again, it's a living, breathing document. It's something that moves forward as changes happen in our communities and in our economy, and I think that's what has to happen with the ACA. The ACA was a start. It's 2,000 pages of, and how many people have actually read it? I don't know. You know, that to me is, I started looking at it, and it's almost impossible to really read through it. But I agree with the Congressman. The keeping your children on till they're 26 is extremely important. I mean, my daughter, thankfully, is working and employed and has her own health insurance. But until she got her job, she was able to stay with us on our insurance policy. The pre-existing coverage, I think, is extremely important. Those things are the focus of, you know, especially for women, because I remember there was a lot of debate around pregnancy being a pre-existing condition. You know, that to me is, we shouldn't be having those conversations. We should be focusing on what needs to work. So we know that there are a couple pieces that do work really well, but we also know that there are a lot of pieces that don't work. One of the kids who worked for me this summer didn't have insurance for 3 years. When the ACA was enacted, he was able to get insurance for the first time, had gone to the doctor for the first time in 3 years, which was, you know, to him, he knew he needed to go, but he didn't have the money to actually go. I see small businesses, and I understand. My husband is a small business owner. We've been dealing, when the ACA first came out, there was a lot of conversation about what it was going to do to our insurance plan. And quite frankly, we were able to do the research, and we have a plan that is pretty much the same what we had before, and we're still getting the same benefits as a small business owner. So, you know, by doing the research, we were able to keep the coverage that we had. You know, when I look at what's been going on, so Congress has voted 66 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act. You know, we talk about being fiscally responsible and to spend the money that we spent, approximately $66 million, that really could have been used to put back into modifying the ACA. Can it be repealed en masse? I don't believe it can. Can we repeal parts that don't work? Absolutely. I think that can happen, and I think what we need to do is focus on the parts that don't work, what we need to put in that will make it better, and we will start to see a coverage for all of our citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Lance, starting in 2015, a penalty of $2,000 per worker is going to be applied for businesses with over 100 employees that do not offer health coverage to their employees. This penalty is causing great concern among businesses that, quite frankly, exist on the margin. Many businesses have already cut hours or the number of employees so as to avoid the penalty. Implementation of the penalty was delayed for a year. Should it be delayed again?
I think it should be delayed by statute. I do not believe the President of the United States has the ability to delay that based upon his authority under the American Constitution. And we in the House are perfectly willing, and I believe we've already done it, and we're perfectly willing, if we haven't already done it, to delay it, but that should be done by statutory law. I'm a great believer in the American Constitution. The President has enormous powers under the Constitution, but he does not have the power of amending legislation. And in so many areas, and this is one of them, Jim, it seems to me that the President misreads the Constitution because he believes, in quite a few areas, that he can amend statutory law unilaterally, and he cannot. That is the responsibility under Article 1 of those who serve in the legislative branch of government, the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. Of course, I think it's terrible that that penalty may go into effect in 2015, and I support it's not going into effect. I also support, for example, repeal of the medical device tax, critically important to this congressional district. It's not a tax on net profits, it's a tax on gross income coming into those companies. It's extremely damaging to this congressional district, which is the site of medical device employers and employees. And certainly, I hope that we're able to repeal that as well. We have repealed that in the House. The Senate, in a non-binding vote, suggested that it would be willing to repeal it. Unfortunately, that legislation has not reached the floor of the Senate because of inaction by Senator Harry Reid, the current majority leader. So to answer your question specifically, it should be repealed, this terrible penalty to businesses, and it should be repealed by statutory action.
Ms. Kovach, same question. Should the implementation of the business penalty be delayed, repealed, or go into effect?
I believe it should be delayed as well. We are not at a place where the ACA is doing what it's supposed to be doing, that the original intent. At the same time, I don't want to see businesses that are trying and working to get employees coverage penalized. We also need to ensure that it's not a mechanism that's used to avoid providing insurance, because we know that it's extremely important for employees to have access to affordable health care. You know, you look at the individuals who don't have insurance and wind up going to the emergency room and are using charity care, which our tax dollars are paying for. You know, if we get to a place where we're actually providing preventative health care to our constituents, and constituents are able to go to the doctors to seek the medical treatment that they need prior to becoming extremely ill, we'll start to see those charity costs go down. You know, I don't want businesses to use, like I said, to use this as an opportunity to not provide insurance, but because we're not where we need to be, I definitely would support the delay. I'm not looking to repeal it at this point in time, because I think once the ACA gets to where it needs to be and is effective for the residents and for the businesses, then businesses should be offering insurance to their employees. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So that concludes our question period. Before we move into the closing comments, I just want to take a moment to compliment you. There has not been one cat call, one boo, no overly enthusiastic clapping, except when I was introduced, so I really appreciate that. But you have been an absolutely great audience. You know, there has been a few head shakes and a few head nods, but you've been really great to work with. And that often is not the case in debates, so I really do appreciate that. So now we are going to move into the concluding remarks. And typically when you go to a debate and candidates do their concluding remarks, it's basically the same thing as they do in their introductory remarks. But we like to change that a little bit and ask the candidates to wax philosophical, to kind of tell us more generally a little bit about the way they look at things. And so today, we're going to ask a question that will allow them to do that. And Mr. Lance, we will start with you. Most people believe there is a role for government in providing safety nets for those in need. These safety nets include everything from unemployment insurance to Social Security to Medicaid and Medicare. In closing, I would like you to discuss your views on how we keep a safety net from becoming a hammock and encouraging people not to take responsibility for themselves.
Thank you very much, and before addressing the question, let me thank you and the Chamber for hosting the debate, and I commend Mayor Kovach on her public service, and I certainly commend Mayor Kovach on raising with her husband a wonderful family, a daughter and 2 sons, and I know how tough it is to be in public life. It's particularly tough on one's family, and so I salute anyone who is involved in public office, and specifically I salute Mayor Kovach. We need a safety net in this country. That was one of the reasons why I voted to open up the government last October. 87 Republicans in the House, a minority of Republicans, a majority of the entire House, and it was a discussion in a primary race that I ran earlier this year. The safety net should include Social Security and Medicare, and I do not believe that they would ever mean a hammock. I think they are programs to which the American people are entitled based upon the hard work of the American people and payment into Social Security and into Medicare. I believe that we need, most of all, to create new jobs in this country in the private sector, and that, of course, is the greatest safety net, the creation of new jobs. And I have been deeply concerned about the labor participation rate, which is at a 30-year low. I also have supported unemployment insurance. There is a discussion now whether it should continue, and I would be willing to look at that. I have voted for extension of unemployment insurance in the past. Some in my political party have been critical of that, but I think any further extension should be also based upon reform of a system so that we can create jobs, and then any further extension should be paid for. And then I want to address the issue, I'm not sure it would be technically a safety net, but we have to get a handle on college costs in this country, ladies and gentlemen. When the President spoke about this in his State of the Union address a year and a half ago, I was one of those in the chamber who stood up and applauded vigorously. Unfortunately, there's been no follow-through. And should I be so fortunate as to be re-elected to Congress, I want to work on this issue, this critical issue, to make college more accessible and more affordable to middle-class Americans. Now, could these in total be called a safety net? I think rather they're the way forward to improve the American nation. Probably the most important bill of the 20th century passed by the Congress was the GI Bill of Rights. And it created a vibrant, strong middle class in this country, and we need to continue that. And I look forward to working in Congress, should I be re-elected, on all of these issues. Jobs, strengthening Social Security, strengthening Medicare, moving forward in a way that average working Americans can make sure their children are educated in institutions of higher education. And finally, let me say that it is an honor to serve this congressional district. It is a district that is well educated, a district that understands the public issues of the day, and I look forward to continuing to strengthen the American middle class, because that is a strengthening of the entire country. Thank you for permitting me to participate in this debate.
Thank you. Ms. Kovach.
Thank you. And Congressman, please, thank you very much for your service. I see Heidi every once in a while in ShopRite, and I know that she's holding down the fort while you're down in Washington. So, you know, we chat every once in a while. And thank you to the Chamber. I really do appreciate this opportunity. Thank you to all of you for being here. This is a It's an opportunity for us to speak, for you to hear what we're about, what's important to us. And obviously, while we agree on many things, we also disagree on other things. And when you're talking about safety net, so I'm going to take this from a more personal perspective. As the director of the New Jersey Division on Women, we worked with programs that helped women become economically self-sufficient. And these are programs that worked on shoestring budgets. I mean, when I say a rape care program would work on less than $800 a week to run a 24/7 operation, I'm not lying. These are programs that are so important to our communities. We need to ensure that we continue to support them. Back in January, I did a roundtable. Senator Booker came out to Clinton. They called me one day and asked, "Can you get me some unemployed women?" I said, "Sure, how many you want?" I work with women's organizations all the time. We had 15 women sitting around the table talking about what the impact of losing the extension of the unemployment benefits means to them. They are struggling to put food on the table for their children. They're struggling to pay their bills. I have residents in the town of Clinton who are unemployed for the first time in their lives, who've never been unemployed before, who call and ask if we can waive the late fee for their taxes because they haven't gotten their unemployment check yet. This is a significant issue. We need to ensure that we do all we can. And you're right, the systems are broken, Congressman. Too many systems are broken, and we allow them to remain broken. We don't hold anyone to ensure that we're fixing them. People that I talk to aren't abusing the unemployment system. People I talk to are putting out resumes every single day. They're going online. They're using their network to try to find jobs. College costs. So my daughter graduated college in December of 2012. Her student loans kicked in 6 months. After graduation, it took her 9 months to find a job. So we need to be focusing on making college education affordable. And I'm not talking about a free education, because I think there needs to be a financial accountability by the students. You need to have a stake in your education, and if there's a financial stake, then there's an agreement that you're going to work as hard as you possibly can. But student loans are outrageous. My daughter worked 2 part-time jobs to be able to make her student loan payments and her car payments. She's still struggling to pay all of her bills. She's working a part-time job as well as her full-time job. She's lucky because she can live at home. How many other students are struggling every single day? We're graduating students every single semester who are not finding jobs, who are getting stuck with student loan bills. I had talked to someone who has $200,000 in student loan bills. She said, "I'm going to be paying these for the rest of my life. I'll be paying for these probably longer than I pay for a mortgage." These are the issues that we need to focus on. We need to make sure that we're providing that hand up and giving them the tools that they need in order to be able to become successful and become economically self-sufficient. Thank you again very much.
All right, well, that concludes our debate. Yes, you can clap now. Lance for joining us this morning and discussing what are really critical issues. I also appreciate very much all of you coming as well. I do want to give a special shout out to that good-looking young man sitting over there. My son Philip is an economist at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And he and his colleagues helped formulate this morning's questions, so they had a very important role in pulling this all off.